Earthbound's a great game, one of the best games even. Unlike many great things, it has consequences. I get a real kick out of playing these sort of short games that are clearly riffing off the mother series. There's a lot of overly edgy or sort of pretentious stuff. A lot of them have this very similar sort of internet humor I don't really like. A lot of over the top unnecessary lore. You have to study up on 10 wiki pages like you're getting your prostate exam next week. But there are also games with legitimately unique and experimental ideas and genuine emotion behind them, and some of them are fun to play, 3 of them. Doesn't matter. I want to start out by defining what I'm even talking about. Most of the games I'm talking about are made in RPG Maker. It's not really a defining factor here though, especially since there's a whole other subgenre of Japanese RPG Maker games, like Black Souls and Aoni and Your Turn to Die that I'm not really talking about, but sort of blur the line with games like Humaniki, which has so much influence over the rest of the genre it would be almost impossible not to talk about. So here are the main defining features: some sort of attempt at quirky humor, bizarre and experimental visuals, and usually made in RPG Maker. But I can talk about whatever I want because it's my video. Those are just the general outlines. These 2 games for this first video are both RPG Maker ones. I love RPG Maker specifically because usually there are parts of games I just can't understand because I don't have any knowledge of game development. So it's refreshing to play games by fellow talentless hacks. RPG Maker is the easiest thing in the world to get a hang of, so I like that I can usually get a good idea of how it's all put together. Anyway, I'm planning to talk about a bunch of these games in different videos, and maybe edit them into one really big video when I think I'm done. Okay, starting off with a pretty niche one here. I know this is a weird one to start off with. You'd think I'd do fucking Amori or something, but I want to show how deep I am into this shit. And it's also the shortest one by far. A lot of them are quite short. It's one of the things I like about these games, but this is probably the only one under an hour. It's not even feature length. You could listen to one album, give it 3.5 stars on Rate Your Music, and get called a homo by someone who listens to exclusively Russian black metal. But it's a sort of interesting one. I like the pastel color scheme. I think it looks pretty nice. These weird little buildings are charming. The actual content of the game has you going around checking out this big row of buildings. Look at all these, it's like fucking Eastern Europe. You have to talk to all the wacky characters and find your mom. The dialogue is something very distinctly from 2013 Tumblr, but it is what I signed up for, so I can't really complain about that. Coming before Undertale is at least a plus for originality. I know well I'm not the target audience for this, and it is a very amateur project, so I'm not gonna rag on it for doing the exact same thing every single more successful game does just as bad. And there is almost a sort of charm in how amateurish some of the stuff in this game is. But you know what does annoy me? All the burgers lying around that you can't do anything with because there's no combat in the game. There's one part I really like here in this hotel, where you have to help out this guy whose brother is lost in the basement. Most of the buildings you go through are just single square rooms with characters that do their jokes at you, but there's a couple of more fleshed out areas. You go down there and get him, and then as soon as you leave, this fat bald guy starts chasing after you, and the key to the exit breaks, so you have to go looking for another one. There's no sound effects or anything either. Gave me a fucking fright. Reminds me of when my uncle would come round. There's only one building you actually need to visit to beat the game, which is this room up here with the Riddler. You have to answer his question to get an item that lets you progress. It's about your stepdad. That sucks, I guess. Let's go get our mom back from the club now. Fucking whore. Once you go in and talk to your mom, you go through the game's emotional climax. I like this little area here with all the flowers. It looks like Mother 3, and these backgrounds are nice as well. Wait, what the fuck are Oni Plays doing here? Well, whatever. There's a couple of kind of cool sequences here that I won't bother spoiling, but the game sort of just ends kind of abruptly. It hasn't really been properly finished. I know I mentioned the burgers earlier, but that's just one example. There's a decent amount of ambition that hasn't really been fully followed through on. But there are a few interesting things here, and it looks pretty as well. It's not the worst one of these I've played. Speaking of that, there's also this one cutscene at the end I'm convinced Amori copied exactly. All these fucking people use watched Tumblr around the same time, so it's very possible. Sorry for already firing shots at Amori, I haven't even gone there yet. Space Funeral actually reminds me a lot of Pen Pal, so it actually follows through with everything it's trying to do. They're both obviously made in RPG Maker and a very unique stylized visual aesthetics, with this mess of blood everywhere and gross clashing color palettes. They're also both quite short and have a lot of focus on going around and talking to different NPCs. One thing they both do I haven't really seen from almost anything else is the use of a variety of music from different sources as the game's soundtrack. I actually really like this. Not everyone is suited for FL Studio or can afford to hire a composer for a shitty little 2-hour RPG Maker game. Of course, an original soundtrack is almost always better, but that isn't always possible. I think this is a pretty decent alternative, especially in Space Funeral where they use all sorts of weird and niche tracks that fit the game's various areas real well. All this early, like 1970s electronic music and this weird sort of scary lo-fi ambient stuff, and it's all really well placed to fit the game's atmosphere perfectly. I understand there are a bunch of reasons why most games couldn't do this even if they wanted to though. These games are both just on itch.io for free and aren't released commercially anywhere. Wouldn't even really be a very good idea for most people, unless you listen to a bunch of music. Don't want to hear like fucking Weezer playing in some game about trauma. What's up with Weezer, by the way? You know, just like how they look. What's the issue there? Let's get into the actual game here. Space Funeral's pretty striking and abrasive right from the beginning here with this creepypasta guy. All the environments and houses and shit are sort of just gross mishmashes of nonsense. It's just random tiles placed around in pots like it's Zelda, but there aren't even rupees inside or a little Deku fleshlight for Link to fuck. But all of it together like this manages to form a consistent aesthetic that looks cool and ties into the game's plot as well, which is sort of interesting. You have to press A on every door to go in and out of buildings and shit. I was kind of annoyed by that. They have it set up so in the RPG Maker script menu, instead of just exiting when you hit that tile, you have to press A as well, like it's the fucking Stone Ages. Why don't you just make me run a half marathon and jerk my cock off into the Xbox Connect microphone as well? You know, while you're at it. God, sorry, I know I'm in a foul mood today. My car I parked in the McDonald's parking lot for 3 months was seized by the police, and they found the homeless guy I ran over in there. All this shit and cum too. It was real embarrassing. Anyway, this one is an actual RPG with real combat, which is something I'm always sort of mixed on in these games. I usually am at the type to complain about random encounters or grinding or anything like that, as long as I'm playing like a proper JRPG that's at least 30 hours long and has lots of dungeons and stuff. If I know I'm going to be playing a game for a long time, I want to be leveled up for all the future dungeons and bosses, and eventual post-game stuff if it has that. If I'm invested in a game and its characters and I enjoy the combat, I even enjoy doing that sort of stuff. But when I'm playing a game I know isn't focusing on combat at all, I kinda just don't want to be bothered. Like, I already know the game's gonna end in 3 hours with a scripted final boss that takes place inside of the main character's head, so I don't want to grind repetitive battles in the boring RPG Maker battle engine for levels I won't use. I think if you're gonna bother with combat at all, you should at least do an Undertale or something and add some kind of unique system that makes fights kind of interesting. I could go into more detail about different games and how they approach this issue, but I'll save it for when it's a little more relevant. Space Funeral does put in a decent amount of effort. There's some cool scripted encounters and the characters learn a bunch of different moves as they level up, but fighting's just kind of boring. I did do this optional area at the beginning that might have overleveled me a bit, but I don't know, I think I'd rather they just keep the important encounters like bosses and stuff. The main focus of Space Funeral, as in many of these, is taking in the unique atmosphere and offbeat dialogue. Not much going on in the first little area here. You meet the game's one party member Leghorse and can go off to the side to do an optional area as well. We're on this raft now, and here you get the gist of the world and how it was once normal and became all gross like this after a big cataclysmic event. This area here is probably my favorite. The color palette all shifts to this virtual boy shit, and this really creepy ambient track starts playing that fits the mood perfectly.
When the low, heavy sky weighs like a lid on the spirit, aching for the light, and when, embracing the horizon, it pours on us a black day which is sadder than any night.
It's like a wizard here that gives you some advice. But I really like this encounter at the end here with this guy popping up and filling up the text box suddenly before you can even realize what's happening. Once you get out from the cave, you get to the game's biggest area, this sand town. This is a weirdly normal area. I mean, the world's supposed to be all fucked up, right? But this is just a normal village of sand people. They just like going around reading the Quran and stuff and not blowing up buildings. They don't do that. Guys, look, I beat the cool dungeon. Fuck! I got turned into a fish. It's fine, I just gotta pay this guy like 200 Somali shillings and he'll turn me back. In this forest, you fight this guy with a guitar. He's like Horse's brother who went crazy after the world got all fucked up. They have like a cool little emotional moment here. I like her big droopy idiot main character who just stands around with his eyes glazed over while this character development happens around him. The next area is this snow place. There's like a little mansion here with Dracula in it. Okay, we're at the game's last area now. The ending is one of the most memorable parts of Space Funeral. It wraps up really well. You have to fight the guy that caused the world to change. He was an artist who saw this really cool looking city and got real mad about it. Just ruined everything. He managed to make it almost as bad as living in North Inner City Dublin. I do think this whole idea for a game is pretty interesting. I would still appreciate it if the game's whole art style was just made that way because it looked nice. But having a whole reason for it the game is centered around and gets developed with Leghorse's whole character arc and eventually pays off with this ending where everything is restored to like the default peaceful RPG Maker world. It makes for a really clever and satisfying ending to the game. And the whole thing is a nice little commentary on creativity and uniqueness in games as well. It's a pretty memorable one for how short it is. And it's free on itch.io, which is always respectable. Okay, video's over.